So whether it's a hard-boiled agnosticism or soft agnosticism, one way or the other, it excludes the very capacity to know whether something is true.
If Christianity is true, does that mean that countless millions before Christ were doomed to hell? The answer to that and other tough questions today on Just Thinking with author and apologist Ravi Zacharias. Welcome to Just Thinking. We hope you've had a great week so far and that you're happy to be nearing the weekend. We're certainly glad it's Friday because that means it's time once again for another live question and answer session with Dr. Ravi Zacharias, this time at the Illinois State University. The first question asked today is of particular interest to any Christian who has found himself in a secular academic environment. Let's listen in.
Yes. How can a Christian student attending a secular university such as this best deal with and guard his heart against postmodern thinking and teachings and views, especially on new technology and advances that try to refute the Word of God, and also with professors who think of the Bible simply as another piece of literature to be discussed in a literature class?
A great question. By the way, I've been in universities like that. I've studied in universities like that. I was telling the talk show host this morning on NPR that my professor of philosophy at Cambridge was Don Cupid. If any one of you comes from England, you know who Don Cupid is. He is an ordained Anglican priest and an avowed atheist. He wrote the book Taking Leave. He wrote The Sea of Faith and Taking Leave of God. When his book Sea of Faith was written, somebody said it really should be entitled Faith at Sea, because that was more descriptive of what was going on. I remember sitting right opposite Trinity Hall, Cambridge, every day in his philosophy lectures, blasting the Christian faith. He would just take his hits at it right, left, and center, postmodern to the core. And the question was, when Don Cupid came in for the lecture, what did Don Cupid believe that day? That's the way we would wonder about what it was he was going to lecture. But if you take postmodernism in 3 or 4 of its fundamental articulations, number one, it's a move against truth, it's a move against meaning, and it's a move against certainty. If you take postmodern writers in their move against truth, move against meaning, and move against certainty, and how it has ultimately even affected language, so that language itself does not have any objective point of reference from the author's viewpoint, but the reader becomes sovereign over the content and the material. You can see the havoc that this kind of thing wreaks, and that's why, by the way, the scientists are coming in a strange way to the rescue and saying you cannot extrapolate postmodernism into notions of truth in the scientific world. So they're trying to sort of provide a block against this kind of philosophical thinking. How does a person respond to postmodernism? The same way one responded to existentialism. I think postmodernism was waiting to be born on the heels of existentialism, where passion and emotion and clutching of meaning became primary. And so Jean-Paul Sartre, on his deathbed, says he finds out that his existentialist philosophy didn't actually work with the way he thought it would. For those of you who were not here yesterday, I made the comment about the CNN news item, 3 items on the top of the news. Number 1, do words have meanings? A survey said no. Number 2, does morality have absolutes? The survey said no. Number 3 item on the news was we were going to bomb Saddam Hussein because we were tired of him playing his word games with us and fusing meaning with the words the way he chose. Postmodernism logically collapses on its own terms. Does a professor of postmodernism expect you to understand what postmodernism means? If he expects you to understand what postmodernism means, then he expects the words he is using to describe postmodernism to have the ontic reference of meaning. So it becomes self-defeating to say to you that language has no meaning and truth has no point of reference. Is that statement meaningful, and is it true? So you do it in one of 2 or 3 ways. One of the ways in which you do it is by forcing them to the logic of their own presuppositions, which does not stand. But secondly, keep from that philosophy becoming a cancer in your own thinking. Truth, by definition, affirms a state of reality that conforms to what you know to be real, and as you measure it. And in your own life, you can see that postmodernism implodes under its own weight. Keep from imbibing and absorbing that kind of... I remember challenging Don Cupid many times in class, and at one point he looked at me and he said this, these are his exact words: "Are you one of those Americans who brings a tape recorder into class and then takes it to the authorities to say, aha, see what the professor is teaching here?" I said, "What?" I said, "I have no tape recorder. I'm just questioning the truthfulness of what you have just finished saying." And he was making erratic statements. Absolutely. In fact, I responded to him in my book, A Shattered Visage, The Real Face of Atheism, because I wrote it while I was at Cambridge then, and his thinking ultimately lost its own popularity. So two things. I think in gentleness and courtesy, you interact with the professors and see that at some point postmodernism collapses in the professor's mind himself or herself. It collapses. But number two, keep from that insidious way of thinking. I don't think postmodernism is a philosophy as much as it is a mood, and the mood will change over a period of time. And frankly, I think there are a couple of positive things about postmodernism, by the way. One of the positive things is it still believes in the strength of community. It believes in the strength of story. And I think the gospel has both the story and worship has the community. To this postmodern mind, the Christian message is a very real one.
One of my friends asked me, what about all these religions that have come before Christianity? And if you grant that the Christian message is exclusive, one of my friends asked or said, isn't this vastly unfair to claim that all these people are damned to hell because they don't believe in Jesus? What would you say to that?
Very fair question, and your friend has asked it very correctly, and obviously not the first one who has asked it. The first part of the question is what I think is a dangerous mistake in dating truth by the calendar. For example, if one says that there's so many that came before, therefore how can this be right? Automatically then anything new that comes around, by virtue of that dating, then Islam would be wrong because it came after Christianity. But that would not be a fair argument to give. And then prior to Buddhism, Hinduism came, and so Hinduism would be right and Buddhism would be wrong. And prior to Hinduism, there was animism and all kinds of other types of isms that have preceded. The way you answer that question, firstly, is to test the integrity and the coherence of the system itself. And all of those systems, as I've said, have claimed exclusivity. For example, the friend who has raised the question, he or she is either follows one of these major religions, or maybe an atheist or an agnostic. In any one of those positions, there's an exclusive stance. And the exclusion would say, I am an atheist because I do not believe God exists, or I'm an agnostic because I believe one cannot know, or I'm an agnostic because I say, although Jesus claimed this and Muhammad claimed that and Buddha claimed that, they have no right to be claiming that, and so I'm just going to say I don't know. So whether it's a hard-boiled agnosticism or soft agnosticism, one way or the other, it excludes the very capacity to know whether something is true. So the first part of the question is easier to deal with, that systems by definition claim exclusivity, and the laws of logic support that. The second part of the question is the one where the painful part of it comes. Then what about all of those who do not believe? I think it is very important to follow a line of reasoning here. And it is this: just because I may not know that putting my hand into a burning candle is going to burn my hand does not keep it from burning when I put my hand in there. I think sincerity has never been a test merely for truthfulness as a vacuous, isolated expression. C.S. Lewis says there are two kinds of people in this world: those who bend their knee to God and say to Him, your will be done, or those who refuse to bend their knee to Him and He says, all right, then your will be done. Every person in their eternal destiny will be exactly where he or she has chosen to be. And that is as fair as one can be, because to give a person the dignity of freedom and then to violate it is to make freedom an elusive thing or an illusionary thing. And so I believe as God has given you and your friend the freedom to choose, your choice determines what it is that your destiny is going to be. So the fairness issue is, I think, mitigated by the fact that the individual makes that choice. Now, in the Christian message, the grace is offered to such a degree that it is not your perfection or my perfection that gets us there. One of the most powerful stories in the New Testament is the story of the prodigal son, who goes and squanders his life. When he asks the father for the inheritance, in effect he's saying to the father, I'm going to act as if you are dead. Give me what is due to me. And he goes and squanders that, and when he finds out he's made a mess of his life, he chooses to come back. And interestingly enough, in violation of Eastern decorum, as it were, the father is waiting at the door for him, not sitting in the back saying, you come here, boy, and you tell me how sorry you are. Not only is he waiting when he sees him, he runs towards him. In the Old Testament, the word is chesed, loving kindness. In the New Testament, it's grace and mercy. And the cross stands as the most merciful expression for forgiveness. And one who chooses to say, I do not want your cross for my forgiveness, I do not think has the legitimacy to say to God, why then are you rejecting me? When they are rejecting the very offer that God has given to give them forgiveness. So the ultimate, somebody asked me on one of the radio programs or television programs, where was God on September 11th? I said, I can give you a long answer or a short answer. He said, give me the short one. I said, exactly where every individual asked him to be.